Hello everyone and welcome back to the one and only Bear Bar Tales. It is I, the one bear that never skips leg day. Mainly because I walk on all four. The Bear Bard. So I'll make an admission. I tend to pull stories that have fault all over the place, but while I have some, I tend to read less of the DM at fault stories. At least where the DM could be considered an antagonist to the story. That's because I've seen a good amount of people say that they're scared out of trying to DM/GM after hearing these stories. Now I want to say that first, stories from r/RPG horror stories, if true and taken at face value, represent such a small fraction of a percentage of games. They are the exception rather than the rule. On top of that, they are given from one person's view, so at best there's some bias. And lastly, some people use Reddit as a creative writing assignment. I try to also avoid the worst of these, but I'm not perfect. So never let any story read by a bear, an owl, a dragon, a crow, or anyone else dissuade you from trying it out. We need more DMs out there, and it's a great skill builder/creative outlet for you. Take these stories for what they are, entertainment with nuggets of knowledge on how to improve your own table experience. All of that being said, today I wanted to cover a couple stories that do show the DM/GM at fault. I believe in holding everyone accountable, even if they did step up to GM. Now, before we get started with all the stories, if you like this kind of content and want to hear more from the Bear Bard, make sure to give some love to the like button. Then, violently smash the sub. Every sub I get gets me one step closer to breaking my back at VidCon. Then not being invited back, so I make my own con called BardCon. Then get really confused when people get mad at me for leaving them out in the sun all day. Well, let's get started with today's first story titled, DM slowly has made the entire campaign revolve around their DMPC. Been playing in a campaign for a bit now with a novice DM, a friend of mine, which was originally intended to be a classic save-the-world adventure beginning of the campaign, dealing with the undead scourge and the king of it, with assistance from some of the NPCs of the world. This campaign is riddled with flaws too long to discuss in this post, but the issue that has become the most important to me is the all-consuming presence of the DMPC introduced early on. Originally, the DMPC was met as a male warlock who was just traveling along with us to help us, appointed to the party by some other important NPCs. Later down the line, this character was retconned to be a female, and brought the entire party back to life after a TPK. This DMPC over the course of many sessions is shown to be an immortal with powers over life and death, and knows every high-ranking NPC in every country on a personal level and with extremely high combat power. The DMPC is even close with the personification of death. Obviously, this leaves many of our PCs wondering why we even need to be there to save the world if the DMPC is essentially all-powerful. As the sessions have continued to progress, the DM always manages to pull focus to their DMPC over and over. Every single character in this universe knows and loves the DMPC. And anytime we are involved with something in the area with the DMPC around, they resolve any issues. Several times we would be fighting something only for the DMPC to suddenly start participating at the end of the fight and one-shot the enemy. Sessions where the DMPC has not been persistent have been lore dumps of the DMPC's lore, or have a relative that has a nearly identical name who also happens to be immortal, and the DM will make sure we know they are strong and cool and should definitely like them. The current plotline involves finding copies of the DMPC and attempting to reunite them, with the original Undead Scourge going unmentioned for about 15 sessions or more at this point. Obviously, me and my fellow PCs are not having a good time with this. We have mentioned that the original plot has been abandoned several times now but got no justification for it. If this wasn't bad enough, the DM literally plays this campaign in another campaign that I'm in. He seems obsessed with this character, and I don't know how to tell him that I hope I never have to see this character another time in my life. In character, last session we were asked what we think of the DMPC, and all but one of the players roasted the hell out of the DMPC. So maybe the DM has already got the message? So here's the classic, I wrote a fanfic of this character on Tumblr but didn't get enough likes. Okay, so maybe not so well-known classic, but I'm coining it in here. This guy just has a self-insert power fantasy he wants to play out, but wants others along for the ride. I'm not going to write too hard about DMPCs because it's well established that they can be a very destructive force in a game. Can some people play them in a game? Sure, but that's the exception rather than the rule. Instead of taking the time with the DMPC, I want to mention a little writing 101 that the DM ignores here. To make someone care about a story, you need stakes. Not cow steaks, but now I'm hungry. Rather, something that is on the line. It could be the fate of humanity, the strength of a kingdom, your life, even something as simple as being able to date Ramona Flowers. But when you have an all-knowing, all-powerful, immortal being that just comes in to save the day every time with no repercussions, then what is on the line? What are the stakes? Why do I care about the thing? The second you take away all fear of failure, you have now taken the stakes away from the player. Now, the player should have set the DM down before this point, but I do like to imagine that they were in this serious moment in-game and the DM wanted a little ego stroke, only to get wild and out roasted to the Shadow Realm. This DM needs to play in a solo game. Ginny D actually just covered a really cool system that I believe works in 5e to play with yourself. Just remember to lock the door first. Now for our second story, titled How My First TTRPG Experience Turned Me Off of TTRPGs for Almost a Decade. So in the early 2010s, I got invited by my childhood friend to join some friends of his to play Cyberpunk 2020. I'd never played Dungeons & Dragons, but I'd been mildly interested and I love futuristic settings, so I was all for it. Now, this was years before 2077 or Edgerunners were anywhere close to being a thing, so I wasn't at all familiar with the setting. At character creation, I wanted to play somewhere closer to my actual self, so I could have a bit of a power fantasy feel. So I played a nerdy media, a reporter in Cyberpunk, whose name was basically mine with different letters. We'll call him Jim. And since I myself am very scrawny, I wanted to play him being scrawny as well. Huge mistake. The team was infiltrating a laboratory to steal a specimen to take back to our employers. We accidentally trip a poison gas trap, but thankfully we all have gas masks. Unfortunately, a security guard was in there with us, and he immediately tackles Jim and tries to remove his gas mask. I'm told to roll the strength check and roll decently, but then the GM tells me it's still a failure. When I demand to know why, he reminds me I put very little points into strength, and so I have no choice but to sit there and watch as Jim loses his mask and asphyxiates on poison gas, eventually dying. I was completely gutted. The game had barely been going for 5 minutes and I was already dead. I excused myself from the table and lied down on the couch where I fell asleep for the rest of the session. To be fair, I do regret not seeing how the game went just to see how everyone else did, but at the time, I wasn't in the mood to see everyone else have fun without me. The next session, I resolved to be super strong to keep that from happening again. I created a Japanese assassin whose name I no longer remember. It was so cybered up, I was just on the cusp of being super psycho. I even specifically got skin weave so that she would be harder to kill. This time, we were tasked with infiltrating a heavily guarded farmhouse, and this time I was ready, only to get agonizingly mowed down by machine gun bullets. To be fair, she lasted longer than Jim, but at this point I was pretty much done. Both of these characters can take it half an hour to make, and no matter what decisions I made to avoid their deaths, I kept ending up being the first one to die. Now, for reasons I don't remember, the group just kinda dissolved after this, but after 2 sessions of this, I was pretty sure TTRPGs just weren't my thing, and never would be. Now, this changed when I finally got into D&D through Critical Role, and when I look back at that doomed couple of sessions, I have to wonder what exactly went wrong. A part of me can't help but feel like I was being targeted, but I have no idea who the DM was before these games, so I don't think that's likely. It's more likely that I had no idea what I was doing character creation-wise or gameplay-wise. At the end of the day, it was an interesting summation of events that led to a miserable experience I can at least laugh about. And for the record, I love Cyberpunk now. Curious if anyone else had bad first experience like this. So I'm going to take a bit more of a pointed view at the GM than the OP did. I do want to start off by saying, while I've wanted to try Cyberpunk 2020 or Cyberpunk Red, I haven't had the chance, so I'm unfamiliar with actually playing a game of it. However, I will say the GM has a responsibility to work with the new player and either help set expectations of the game or help ease them into it. Not to bring up what's almost a catchphrase at this point, but this is why Session 0 is so important. If you're running a grindfest, cool, tell the players, then have them roll up multiple characters. If I know I'm about to play a game of Morkborg or something similar to it, I'm not getting too attached to a character, and I'm sure as hell not just bringing one character sheet. But let's say it's not set up as a grindfest. Say it's generally a 1 character per campaign situation. Well, if something is wrong with the character build, the GM should have pointed it out pre-game to help them out. They know it's a first-timer. Hell, even if they're not a first-timer, you don't start offing people within minutes of the start of a campaign without both a good reason and a way to get that player back in the game, whether it be some sort of resurrection or a second character. Now, some people right now are typing up in the comments like, it's not a GM's job to teach people, they need to deal with it themselves. And to a degree, you have a point. But honestly, if that's your view, just tell people you're not up for newbies. Teaching/coaching is a skill and a mindset that a lot of people don't have, and honestly, that's okay. Just tell people ahead of time and set that expectation. By saying you're okay with newbies, you're agreeing to be patient and help out. Sure, they also need to be putting in the work themselves, but you need to work together. Now, I'm sure there's details here missing, but I will say the GM feels a bit like the kid who ripped wings off a butterfly and watched it struggle. I'm glad the OP gave the medium another shot. Moving on, I'd like to introduce the new Professor Bearbard for today's Not a Bear Facts. Hello, and thank you for the introduction. The koala, commonly referred to as the koala bear, is in fact not a bear, because it does not have the right qualifications. Boo! Well, it is in fact a marsupial. Now, I do not like to speak ill of nature, but these are not good at living. They force themselves to survive mainly on eucalyptus, which is normally a toxic plant, but these buggers grew an organ that detoxifies the plant. However, it still provides very little nutrition, so they live very sedentary lifestyles, sleeping around 18 hours a day. They also have chlamydia, so there's that. Maybe they should have stayed in their lane and not pretended to be bears. That is it for today's lecture. I hope to bring you a smarter bear next week. Well, that was a hell of a presentation. Thank you, Dr. Bard. And now for today's Bear Bard's Cave of Art and Wonders. Today we have another runner-up to the Bear Bard in Space art contest from Ko-Fi subscriber Armandeus. I was talking with Drake before this thing even started and told him I was really hoping at least one person made a Space Marine, and Mr. Armandeus freaking delivered. This piece is amazing and was another reason why I hated having to choose only one winner. It's so crisp and clean and perfect. He does the Emperor proud, although he probably should leave the helmet on around the Inquisition. If you enjoyed what you heard today, make sure to like the video and give the channel a sub. If you want to help support the channel further, you can look into my Ko-Fi, where you can sign up for a membership, a one-time tip, pick up a sticker, or even commission me for a few lines. If you want to check out the bear in other forms, you can check out my Discord, Reddit, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, and TikTok. You can also check out the Bear Bard Tales podcast, available pretty much anywhere. Before I go, I want to give a huge shout out to my Ko-Fi subscribers. At the Bear Council tier, we have Mr. Hypocritical. At the Big Bear tier, we have Dinner Drake, Mr. Mint, Armandeus, Skydiving Ellen, and Dave Haggerty. At the Mossy tier, we have Novatonics and the Reuven Gritters. Thank you all so much for your support. It means the world to me. For now, though, this has been the Bear Bard. Remember to stay kind, stay beautiful, and keep on living that bard life.